Welcome back to Barely Keto. Thanks for coming. In this episode, we're going to go through three things. First, I want to go back and revisit my cardiology visit back in May, because I left off something really important that I learned about a medication I was taking for heartburn, and I had to get off it right away because of the impact that it could have to my cardiovascular system. The second thing I want to do is I want to revisit the interventional cardiology appointment that I had, and that's the woman that put me on this whole path, gave me the book for the diabetes code, did the blood draw, and I want to talk about what that all looked like and the markers that she's particularly interested in, because there are some new things that cardiologists are tracking beyond just your simple A1C and your cholesterol levels, and no one really took the time to explain that to me before, so I want to explain it for you so that you can have that conversation with your doctor or your cardiologist. And then third, I'm going to introduce you to my friend Stacey. Stacey and I have known each other for a really long time. She knew me when I was at my ideal weight, and we've been together ever since. And she recently started a diet a couple years ago now for the AutoImmune Protocol. She was having some really severe inflammation in her system, and this is what she landed on to control that. It is probably one of the most stringent diets you can do, and it makes this look like a cakewalk, and I appreciate that perspective, and I thought it would be a nice benchmark for you all to hear about too. And then we'll wrap up with what's coming in episode 3. So this is Barely Keto. I'm Carl. Let's get started. The reason I went to see my cardiologist in the first place last year was around January. I was climbing a flight of steps and I got so winded I couldn't catch my breath when I got to the top. And that has never happened to me in my life. You know, I'm a big guy, but I'm as active as I can be. And it was like a switch had been flipped. So I called my general doctor and I went in to see her about it, and I happened to mention it to her, and she told me to pull up my pants legs, and she noticed that I had swelling in the lower part of my legs, which I hadn't even caught. And so that, long story short, ended me up at the cardiologist, and I had to have a cardiac catheterization. Now, when the report for that came back, there was, about a week of some pretty sobering news where it looked like I had a massive plaque in one of my arteries that had doubled in size in just 3 years. So by the time I got into him, I had already done a lot of my own homework. I went through all my medications to see if there were any ties to cardiac dysfunction and the medications that I was taking. And that is when I found out about the Proton Pump Inhibitors. And I found an article from a medical journal. I don't just do Google things that all lead to cancer. I do actually take the time to make sure I'm checking legitimate sources. And I printed out the journal article, which I had to pay for, brought it into the cardiologist, and we had a conversation about it. So many of us who are trying to get our A1C under control or our type 2 diabetes under control also have issues with heartburn, acid reflux, and sometimes a condition called GERD. And the reason for that is that, let's face it, we're not responsible eaters and sometimes drinkers. We eat or drink too much, too late, too richly, too spicy, whatever the trigger is, and we push the stomach to its limits, quite literally, and then sometimes that spills the acid out of our stomach and into our esophagus. So the reason I wanted to talk about proton pump inhibitors is that's often a common way to treat it. It's certainly advertised as such. So at the low end of the spectrum, we have heartburn. At the upper threshold, we have something called GERD. And in a nutshell, GERD is when your stomach acid goes through the sphincter that connects to your esophagus and starts eroding or corroding the lining or the tissue of your esophagus. It can be a mild sort of painful sensation. It can feel like the worst heartburn you've ever had in your life, or it can feel like you physically have something stuck in your throat. About some time ago, I started having issues with heartburn, and then it was acid reflux, where every so often I'd burp literal acid into the back of my throat. And then that started to turn into the condition called GERD. And so I had to go see an ear, nose, and throat specialist about it, and his solution for it to let the tissue in my esophagus heal was to put me on this medication called Dexilant, which is a proton pump inhibitor. What a proton pump inhibitor does is sort of just what it sounds like. It inhibits the proton pumps. And what the proton pumps are the microscopic volcanoes, for lack of a better metaphor, that are actually putting the acid into your stomach to digest the food in the first place. And how does all this tie into my cardiology visit, you ask? I'm glad. Now, during that conversation, the good news was that the radiology report was misread, and I didn't have the blockage at all, and thank heaven, because it would have required surgery. But that still left me with the fact that I was taking this proton pump inhibitor that, according to this journal article, could cause very severe cardiac issues if it weren't being administered in the way that it was designed to be administered. So I handed the doctor the article. I asked him to validate that it was, A, a good journal, and, B, the fact that I'd been on this medication for far longer than it was recommended to be used. So he took the article. He told me, yes, it was a well-respected journal. When my cardiologist asked me how long I was taking it, I told him the same thing, 11 years. And it got a little awkward because, as I said, I've been under his care for at least 3 or 4 by that point in time. So he took the article from me, he read it, he agreed with it, and he said, we have to get you off this immediately. He's like, but there's a wean, you can't just stop. So I was like, well, why do I have to wean off of it? And he just dropped some knowledge on me that some medications, if you stop cold turkey, you actually have what's called a rebound effect. And it makes the conditions that you're suffering worse. And that was sort of an aha moment for me, because I had tried over those 11 years to stop taking that medication on more than one occasion. It's very expensive. It's like over $100 a fill. Well, I'd get to a point where I'd feel okay. So I'd be like, oh, I'm going to stop taking the medication. About a week would go by, and out of nowhere, I would have the worst bleed through, like GERD or acid reflux event I'd ever had. And that is what the rebound was. So in the article is some guidance on how you step down. So the takeaway from all this is these are very dangerous medications to be on for a prolonged period of time. It's well documented. It has been for a really long time. It is a billion-dollar industry. It is up to you to take control of that and get yourself off of it. So talk to your doctor, talk to your cardiologist, pay for the cost of the journal article. It was only a few dollars. And take it with you to your next appointment. There are other ways of getting off these medications. There are gentler medications for this. But the thing is, the great part about this is that this particular lifestyle change, the low carb, high fat, intermittent fasting with a no sugar, I don't get heartburn anymore. I've at this point lost 40 plus pounds. I lost now 5 inches off of my waist. So, and the way that the fasting works, I'm no longer eating so close to bedtime. So I think I've had heartburn, just regular old heartburn, about 4 times since I started this diet. So the good news is you're learning that if you're on PPIs, get off them. And the other good news that you're learning is this diet will make it so that you don't have the heartburn anymore. So it's all good news. Back to the interventional cardiologist. And that's the one that gave me, again, buy it, and put me on this path to begin with. And I want to cover 3 things. First, I want to cover off the blood panel that she pulled for me before our first visit, so that if you're interested in talking about that with your cardiologist or your doctor, you can do that. 2, I want to talk about a couple new factors that they look for in your blood. And then the third thing I want to do is cover off a more complete in one spot version of all the guidance that she gave me, so that you can start getting your head around what we're going to get into in the next episode, because we're finally going to get there next time. So the blood that was drawn was the Boston Heart Diagnostic, and it looks for these 4 main components right here. Now, it's not always covered by insurance, and at the time it was about $350 out of pocket. So if you talk to your doctor about it, depending on what your particular medical conditions and your underlying conditions are, it might be covered by insurance. And sometimes doctors have sway about pulling some strings to make that happen. And worst case scenario out of pocket, like I said, it's a few $100s. And to have the peace of mind to know that you're targeting the right things is important, because there are some of us like me who, no matter what I do, I'm always going to have a genetic problem with getting my good cholesterol up there. So, that helps your doctor figure out medications or whatever needs to be done to help you fight the battle with the genes that you have. So I have a crib sheet here because this gets a little technical and I don't want to get it wrong. There were 2 markers in particular that the interventional cardiologist was interested in my blood. They're called lipoproteins, and it looks at A1 and something called B. And they're abbreviated as APA1, which you'll see up there, which is the primary protein component of our HDL. And then there's ApoB, which is the primary protein component of our LDL. At my second blood draw, 7 weeks in, my ApoB, or ApoB, had risen by almost 20%, and that's not good. And I'll get to why in a minute. My ApoB went from being in the green before I started this diet change to jumping up 20% and now being in the red. It was the one thing that didn't come out well for me. And what I learned about that is that the ApoB value is negatively impacted by butter, palm oil, coconut oil, meat fats, milk fats, and fructose. Now, I had not eaten as much bacon as I had eaten in those 7 weeks, and probably the 7 years prior to that. You know, keto was the first framework I could kind of cling to that met the guidelines of get the book. And I overdid it. And it's in part because of my genes. So this is why I keep suggesting that you get some baseline blood work so that you know what you're doing to yourself, so that you can correct before you're 3-4 years in and you've done more damage accidentally. So I was glad to get the information, because what it caused me to do then was, it kind of led me to this hybrid model that I'm doing now with the low carb, high fat, no sugar, and the intermittent fasting, because I, for whatever reason, if I were to follow all the eat all the fat that you want on the keto diet, I'd have a problem. That would cause a problem for me. And I'm glad that I found that out. So, you know, do yourself a solid and get the blood work. So what I did was I took the bacon out. I'll still have bacon, but not like I was doing. I mean, I was having a lot of bacon, and it was delicious. And it kept me going on those first 7 weeks. That is bad for me. So I also stopped eating things like the 80-20 blend of the ground beef, and I went back to the lean blend. I started putting more chicken in my diet. I was eating cream cheese like it was going out of style those first 7 weeks, and I love me some cream cheese. I'm a Philly boy, and I like my Philadelphia cream cheese. But again, dairy fats, it's a problem with that particular indicator. So I cut that back. I used to always eat the part skim mozzarella cheese back when I was in the green range, but during those 7 weeks, I was like, well, the hell with that. It says eat all the fat you want, so I did. And although I was losing the weight, apparently this is why it's so important to do the blood work too. You can't just wing it. So the other thing I course corrected is I went back to the part skim mozzarella, the part skim ricotta cheese, and I get my blood drawn again in March, and it's my hope that ApoB factor will be back in the green. And if it is, then I know that at least for me personally, in the way that my body was put together, that I can't recklessly enjoy all the fat of the keto diet. I've got my first prop for you. Ready? The other thing, the last thing that we talked about before we moved on to like the plan, is she told me about this. It's called, I think it's pronounced Viscipa, and it's icosapent ethyl. And I take 4 grams of this a day. And what it is basically is fish oil on steroids without the steroids. So what that does is, for people like me who have some genetic limitation, the doctor can prescribe something like this for you so that you can, you know, fight against your genes. So that is the full story now of cardiology for Carl. So here are the things that I walked out of that first appointment with the interventional cardiologist with. I'm going to read it because I've had 3 strokes. I do the best I can. So first, you need to fast 16 hours a day, and then all your food and caloric intake goes in the other 8 hours. I personally landed on 12 to 8 as my eating window, and then I'm fasting the rest of the time. So patience is on a tear today. So what that means is when I get up in the morning, I have coffee. She said I can have a splash of milk in it, but that's it. No sweeteners. The second thing is eat vegetables with every meal and as a snack. Now the good news is avocado is a vegetable, so if you're a breakfast person, you want to maintain breakfast, you're thinking, well, how do I have a vegetable? Have like a little avocado in your omelet or whatever. Eliminate your starchy vegetables, which is a surprisingly long list to me. I mean, I knew about potatoes, but I didn't realize that things like peas and beans and string beans were going to be a problem. Cut out refined carbohydrates in all your wheat flours. which again takes out everything that's made from. So that gets rid of your bread, your pasta, your cake, your cookies, your bagels, all that stuff is gone. And you want to cut out processed foods. And I guess the easiest way of thinking about processed foods, there are a couple ways you can look at it. Look at the ingredients list. If it's overly long and has things that you can't, pronounce and lots of chemicals, it's processed. If it's something that would normally require refrigeration, but it can sit out on a counter like a Slim Jim, do not put that in your body, because the same chemicals that are going to keep that meat from rotting are going to work against the flesh in your body. Easiest way to think about it. So stay away from the processed food as much as possible. And increase your healthy fats. Now, I talked about bacon being a problem for me in terms of that ApoB factor being impacted by certain fats. Well, think about olive oil is high in fat. That's a healthy fat. You've got avocado oil. I use that when I cook. You've got avocados. She told me I could have half an avocado a day, and I do. It's delicious. It's amazing what that tastes like when you mix it with a little mayonnaise, or even just spread it instead of mayonnaise, and it's quite good. So I'm going to put all these things in the Google Drive folder for you as well, so you have them for your reference, so you don't have to write them down. And I hope you find that list really helpful. And now it's time for our first guest appearance. The Zoom call and our iPhones were not working well together when we did this, even though I had done some testing earlier in the day. So if the photo's a little grainy, I apologize for that. We did the best we can, and we have Christy on the next time. It will be better. So Stacey's going to talk to us about a diet that she's on. So have a watch and a listen, and I'll be back to wrap up after.
Oh, I like your sweater.
Thank you. This one is named Scudder. This is Scudder.
I like it.
Everyone, I wanted to introduce you to my good friend Stacey. Stacey and I have known each other for probably most of my adult life. Stacey's going to talk to us today a little bit about herself, whatever you feel like sharing, and then the diet lifestyle change that she adopted. So tell us a little about yourself, Stacey.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you. I love what you're doing with Barely Keto. Your first episode was truly awesome. So genuine, so supportive and helpful for anyone who wants to go on this journey. I was really, really impressed, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So really excited to be here to support you. So let's see a little bit about myself. So I am 54, married, mom of two, a son in college, one in high school. Both my kids play ice hockey, so we're a traveling, crazy ice hockey family. I own my own business. In fact, January marks the beginning of my 18th year as a marketing research consultant. Thank you. I'm very, very proud of the work I do in the business. And I mean, I think those are the basics.
I know that you're following the paleo diet. So let's start by telling everybody about that. What are the basics, do's and don'ts, and how did you discover it?
I actually refer to it as the AutoImmune Protocol diet, or the AIP diet. Back when I started doing this, I researched the fine nuanced differences between the AIP and the paleo. And honestly, I can't speak to exactly what those are anymore. I think they're essentially one and the same. And the book that I follow, essentially, it's all about the autoimmune protocol diet, but it calls itself the paleo approach. So, all, I think, different words essentially saying the same thing. But, the basic idea behind the diet is that it is designed to heal the gut. So many diseases, particularly autoimmune diseases, source from the gut. They call it leaky gut, which is such an awful name that brings such terrible things to mind. But that's the truth of it. And so the diet is designed to heal the gut, create, lasting gut health. And along with that, it's a nutrient dense way of eating. So in top line, you are removing foods that are, bad for the gut, and only eating foods that are gut healthy and just have lots of nutrients. So if I'm eating, I'm eating something that's good. I'm taking in nutrition, and that's a huge change from how I had lived my life prior to this. The AIP is one of or may possibly be the most stringent approach or that I've come across.
In that case, then talk a bit about like what led you there, like what was going on in your body or happening in your life that made you sort of evaluate all this and go, this is the way I need to go.
Absolutely. My journey started back in 2013, although I didn't know it at the time. I started with a weird twinge kind of in my arm, actually, which ultimately turned out to be frozen shoulder, idiopathic frozen shoulder, which means there's no identifiable cause for why it occurred. I was young at the time and I'm not diabetic. I had no injury. None of the things that normally lead to frozen shoulder were true for me. It took quite a while to figure it out in terms of what was happening, get a diagnosis, and then, went through that journey, which started out with, refusing all or I shouldn't say refusing, not wanting any medical, no injections, no pills. I didn't want any of that, surgery, none of that, and ended with me begging for any and all pills, interventions, surgery, whatever they could possibly do for me. I would have let them do it at the time. 6 months after, I healed from all that, which took a while, the other side, the other shoulder started, and and to this day, I don't know why that one started. And I believe, no doctor has said this to me, but I truly believe from all the reading that I've done that first frozen shoulder kicked off an inflammatory cascade in my body that just didn't turn off. Or maybe something else kicked off the inflammatory cascade and that led to the frozen shoulder, one or the other. But that's when inflammation was introduced into my life. I would just find myself stiff and sore all the time. I'd sit at the desk for an hour and I'd get up and look like an 80-year-old lady trying to get everything moving again. No pain, and it wasn't in my joints. It was more just in my body and my muscles. Being tired, sometimes being tired, waking up tired, an 8-hour good sleep, waking up tired. I didn't know it at the time, but definitely experiencing memory problems, which I think were linked. There's Alzheimer's in my family, so I was pretty panicked over that for a few years. So the the best way I can describe how I was feeling, because I looked normal, I operated in my life normally. No one would have had any idea something was wrong. I just didn't feel myself. And the best way I can describe it is, I used to say that if I was in the forest and I came across a bear and that bear wanted to eat me, I would have just laid down and said, okay, have your meal, because the thought of running away or dealing with that bear would have just taken too much mental and physical energy. Now, if I met that bear in the woods, that bear would have to run really fast to catch me because, I'm ready to go. But so it's kind of a funny way of saying it, but I just wasn't myself for a long time. This went on for years. Tried different things. I was trying high doses of turmeric. That helped, but I could go on trying different things to try to just shift the situation in my body, knowing all along that I needed to eat differently, that eating differently would most likely change things. But like many people, I was, I think, mentally and physically addicted to everything I ate. I use that word, maybe I use that too loosely, but that's how it felt. I would think about giving up my French fries and my cheese and, my cheesesteaks and potato chips and all this stuff. And my thought was, hell no, you can't make me. One day I was walking to a hockey rink and they had this little sign in the window. It stopped me in my tracks. And I have the quote on my desk. I look at it every day. It says, "You are your own problem and your own solution." Not rocket science, but it was what I needed to hear on that day that just kind of coalesced things. Yeah. Nothing changed on that day, but I came home, I thought about that quote, I wrote it down, I put it on my desk. And then one day, maybe 9 or 10 months later, I woke up one morning after a good night's sleep, tired, and just something switched. The switch flipped and I just said, I am sick and freaking tired of being sick and tired. And that's it. And that was the day that everything changed.
How did you go, okay, today's the day.
Yeah.
And instead of eating these things that I would normally have eaten today, I'm now eating these things. How did you get from here to here?
I knew about the AIP and knew about just kind of the basic idea of a low inflammatory diet, but hadn't done any research, didn't know, had a house full of the kind of food that I'd been eating all along. So I couldn't eat breakfast that day. So I Googled, quickly found, the basics, realized there was nothing in the house that I could eat for breakfast. So I went without breakfast, which for those of you who know me, know that that's a really big deal. I've never missed a meal in my life. Went to the grocery store, I think at lunchtime to get some things to make a salad, and went online, found this book, ordered it, patched things together for, a couple of days until I could quickly absorb what I needed to know, get some food into the house and all of that. But I did go cold turkey. So it wasn't easy. And I should say that I don't cook, and I wasn't the cook and I wasn't the grocery shopper. And I don't like either of those activities. So those had been big obstacles. So I had to get myself to the grocery store right away. I had to start preparing something, like all that had to change all at one time.
And so how does that look within the family then? Like what's the work-life on this one?
That's been an interesting journey. So my husband, God love the man, is supportive of all things. This one wasn't easy because he is the cook. He cooks for flavor, not for health or following any guidelines or anything like that. And he does all the grocery shopping. We struggled a little bit at first. He certainly was supportive, but it wasn't easy. He definitely got frustrated at times. Me saying, I can't eat that. Okay, well, what can you eat? We found our groove. So I had to do some of my own cooking at first while I was sorting things out. I guess within a couple of weeks, we found a groove, but it was tough. I would say we didn't settle in all together until probably a good 6, 7, or 8 months later, because I'm the only one that eats like this. So Dave is basically cooking sometimes a separate meal for me every night. So and going out to eat became a little bit more challenging. So we had our bumps in the road.
If you look at the typical American diet, like what's gone?
What's gone is dairy, gluten, refined sugar, and even fruit. Of course, many things have fructose. So a lot of refined sugar is gone, but you're also limiting other sources of fructose, even natural fructose. Because the body, sugar is sugar for the body in many respects. Nightshades, which includes tomatoes and eggplants, nuts and seeds, spices, certainly anything to do with peppers or tomatoes or anything like that. That's the basics. So of course, what people always say to me is, well, then what do you eat? What I eat is any kind of poultry, seafood, meat, almost all veggies, other than nightshades, of course. And so that forms the basis of my diet. A protein source and veggies. Even eggs come out, rice comes out, grains, there's no grains, because all of that can contribute to gut imbalance. And then the idea is that you go for, you really should go like 6 months because the gut's got to heal. And that's the key. Leaky gut has to heal. And so if you're having even a little bit of the foods that are bad for your gut, which could be a little different than what's bad, mine versus yours, but even a tiny bit could prevent, the gut from healing. So you go as clean, 100% clean if you can, or as clean as possible for 6 months. And then, you've probably healed and you can start introducing certain things back in, but many things don't ever come back in. And I should also say that I don't eat anything out of a package. So if it's a pre-prepared food out of a package, it is 99.999% guaranteed to have ingredients that are essentially toxic. So if I summarize it, everything I'm eating is food. If you think about a lot of what we eat, it's not actually food, Doritos or other processed kinds of pre-prepared foods. It's not actually food in the sense of nutrients to the body.
Many people don't realize that, your intestines and your gut are a huge part of your immune system in general.
I started this in January 2 years ago, and then
Oh.
COVID hit in March. So I have not had an opportunity to test drive that. But then, then we went into lockdown. So, which I will say actually turned out to be a blessing for the changes that I needed to make, kind of hunker down at home and focus on home cooking. In a crazy way, for me personally, I was fortunate to have that change in lifestyle because it removed many of the trigger situations while I was trying to get my feet underneath of me. I can say, I do, we have returned to eating out and that sort of thing, and, traveling with hockey. And I have managed to navigate that pretty well. The only thing, I can't do fast food. So, as long as I'm eating at a restaurant of a certain basic level where you can speak to a waiter and say, ask for modifications and things like that, I do okay. Fast food, only once in the 2 years have I gotten into a situation where I had no choice but to get something to eat at a rest stop on a turnpike. And I got a burger with no cheese and took it off the bun. And that was the best I could do. At least I didn't go hungry. But I admit I still get a little nervous when I travel, especially on airplanes, because I worry like, gosh, am I going to be able to find what I need on the other end? But we have done some travel, and so far it's always worked out just fine. So I'm learning to just to worry less about it. It seems to work out.
What one piece of advice would you offer someone who's looking to make a really severe or dramatic change, in their trajectory for how they approach or consume food?
So one is that you're worth it. You're worth the effort to try, because this is your life and we only get one of them. I guess most importantly, that the power is within you. I feel like if I could do this, anybody can. I was as entrenched as they come, and not even a cook or a grocery shopper. Didn't want anything to do with either of those two activities for the rest of my life. So the power is within you. I promise you, even if you don't think it is there. If you're committed to growth and to shifting where you are, it will come. It will come. You'll have your day, whether it's a moment like it was for me or whether it's gradual. And where I went cold turkey, you don't have to do that. A lot of people make small gradual changes and work their way towards it. I believe failure doesn't exist. I believe in every moment we're just doing our very best. Failure is an interpretation that comes after the fact. And if you can remove that out of your vocabulary and out of your thinking, then what you're left with is just doing your best each day and every moment. And you just keep on doing that. And if I could, this was a little aside from the question that you asked, but I'd like to just touch on the ways that this has changed me, now 2 years later. Well, I should say that I felt the first benefits. The inflammation was practically gone within a week and a half. So after years upon years of dealing with this, in a week and a half, I felt like a brand new person. I think that was removing the dairy and the gluten, and just, but, I have more energy. I am mentally clearer. My memory is better. Where I told you I was kind of panicked, like, wow, am I the next, person with early onset Alzheimer's? I don't feel that way anymore. Like, it has shifted just a tremendous burden as far as what I thought was happening with my mind and my memory. My mood is lighter. I'm happier. I always thought I was happy, but now if I was happy here, now I'm happy here. I just, I remember about a month after starting this, I was in the kitchen and I caught myself kind of bebopping to some music that I had going on and realized that I couldn't remember the last time I had done something like that, just lightness of mind and body. So there's that. I wake up happier. And I know I'm forgetting some of the way. Oh, I know. Gosh, one of the big ones, because I was so entrenched in the food and it had such a big hold on me. the fact that I've just removed those things from my life has freed up so much mental and emotional energy, because every day I would live my life with, oh, should I eat that? No, I really shouldn't. Oh, but I really want that. Well, but I shouldn't. Ah, damn it, I did that. Now what? And that's just gone. So I don't have that constant mental tape running in my head that would swing from positive to negative. And that maybe that's why I'm happier. I don't know, but that's made such a difference. So any one of those things would have been worth it. But I'm kind of amazed at collectively what the differences have been.
You've eliminated far more than I have, and even I noticed like huge improvement in my inflammation factor. So I get it.
And you look amazing. Like people will say to me, oh my gosh, you just look good. And I see that in you. Like you've got like a glow about you. You just have a healthy glow. And just, I don't know, just in your whole being, I can see the shift.
Well,
it's all good.
Thank you. Okay, well, thanks so much for opening up about this, and I hope everybody got some takeaways from this. I know I did. So thank you.
So too. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
That is a commitment. I didn't realize until she and I talked the level of commitment that it took and the level of benefit that she was getting out of it. And it really gave this diet some perspective for me, because honestly, this is a cakewalk compared to that. So, Stacey, I know you're going to be watching. Thanks so much for taking the time to do that with me, and I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that it's brought you the relief that you were looking for. And as you know, I support you in your journey as much as I know you support me in mine. And it occurred to me that we're at sort of an odd moment in history. We know that the healthcare system is overburdened and has been since the start of COVID. I don't know that we'll ever get back to what it was like pre-COVID. So many people have left it. I think that the burnout rate is so severe that the culture has probably changed. And I'm not knocking anybody. I have the utmost respect for the healthcare community. It's simply an observation. So what you need to do as a patient, what we all need to do as patients, is be less shy about advocating for ourselves. And I'm not saying in a hostile or confrontational way. It's just know your background, have your story, bring it with you to your visit, have everything in writing about, this is my medical history, these were my surgeries, these are the pills that I'm on. Even if it's a doctor in the hospital system and you're in that system in terms of the computer system, take a hard copy with you. I can't tell you how many times I've had a nurse look at my physical copy and go, oh, we don't have that in here. So it is your body, and it is your responsibility to make sure that your body is cared for by whomever to the best of your ability to make sure that that happens. Not confrontational, it's partnership.